So, no introduction, right? Joe Stevens. So hello, Joe.
Hello. So what do we do now? We talk about slides?
Well, what we're going to do first is you and Noah and Mike have some fantastic slides put together, and I know you have incredible stories to tell us about every single one of those.
I'm going to go to my chair now.
I know, and Joe wants to move around, so I'm going to hang out here, and I know he's going to be tipping off Noah as he wants to move along. So, Joe, it's all yours.
Thank you.
I hope you don't mind. Every now and then I might jump in and ask you
You
something.
can sit my lap.
Well, we'll see about that. Joe Stevens.
Testing, one. Thank you. Ex-boss Paul McCartney, I worked for him when he put together Wings after being in the Beatles. He was a bit brain damaged from being in the Beatles, so we had to take care of him. As we toured Europe, he had a 5-piece band, and his wife was the keyboard player, Linda McCartney, who I knew because she was a photographer. And she was told by her husband one day, "Guess what? You're the keyboard player." She said, "I have a tin ear. I can't be your keyboard player. You're nuts." And he said, "I'll teach you. I'm Paul McCartney from the Beatles. I can teach anything." And so she became the keyboard player. And then during rehearsals, she turned to her hubby and said, this is before I was on the scene. She said, "You got a problem, Paul." He said, "What is that?" "Who's going to take the pictures now?" So he said, "I don't know. Find somebody, you know all these photographers." So she found me, and I became the Wings tour photographer. That's how I got it. I replaced Linda McCartney. And so that's Paul. And now here's John Lennon in London on Oxford Street at a demonstration. Some friends of ours have just gotten locked up for 36 months for obscenity in a magazine. And John and Yoko supported that magazine. They paid the bills on it, and it wasn't obscene at all. And later it was thrown out of court. And so there was a big march on the street. The reason why he has plastic bags on his hands, he and Yoko went into a store, they'd been wearing cowboy boots, and for the march, and their feet were like hamburgers by that time. So they zipped into a shoe store and bought socks. They sat on the curb, put on socks. They were good hippies. This was 1971. So they didn't want to live in the streets with the plastic bags. They wore them. Here's Paul and Linda on that tour in Gothenburg, Sweden. They've just got arrested for putting pot into Sweden. And that's the Swedish cops. And Linda was screaming, "Get Joe Stevens, get Joe Stevens." Because I was in the audience hanging out with some girls. And I should have been in the restroom. So I ran in there and I took all these pictures, and she's yelling out to me, "Get it on the cover of the New York Post and the Daily Express." And I was getting orders from her as she was getting arrested. And then after they put him in the cop car and took him to jail, I got into a taxi, went to a local newspaper, and got it published all over the world. On her orders. She told me exactly what to do. That's Keith Richard from the Rolling Stones. And he and his girlfriend, the actress Anita Hallenberg, the one in the middle, they're going to see a movie in Leicester Square, 1970-71, with Mick Jagger in the movie. It's called Performance. Excellent film. I recommend it. And directed by Nicholas Roeg. So she starred in the movie with Mick Jagger. And so they're going to the world premiere of it. And in those days, you could smoke in the movie theater. Keith brought 3 packages of cigarettes. Of course, because he was a big shot celebrity, he gave out a lot of cigarettes. People would grab the cigarettes and never smoke them. They said, "This is Keith Richards." Mick Jagger, Rod Stewart, Ronnie Wood. Ronnie was playing in the Faces with the guy in the middle of Rod Stewart. He didn't know on this particular occasion that He lost his guitarist, Ronnie Wood on the right, to play in the Rolling Stones. He didn't know. It was at this party, I knew, because I heard them talking. And about an hour later, they finally broke the news to him that he'd lost his guitarist. But Ronnie Wood on the right was ecstatic because all of a sudden he was in the Rolling Stones. He's still in there now. That's Ronnie and Keith. That's where they just smoked cigarettes and drank lots of booze. They cursed a lot. There's Mr. Jagger in Manchester, England, 1970, 72. A small gig, about 6,000 seats, and now they do like 90,000. And someone told him that I was there, and so they pushed me to the front of the stage, and he kept working for my camera. He almost came into the lens of the camera. That's what he was trying to do there. And he scared the hell out of me, because I didn't know him. Bette Midler, Bette Midler and Mick Jagger, Bette wanted to cover A Beast of Burden written by the Rolling Stones. And so she got a rock and roll video together, a crew, and they rented a nightclub in New York. And the cinematographer, the guy that shot it, invited me to come because I knew I worked on a couple of his films, his motion pictures. And so I get there, and I'm standing on a ladder, and they're all standing on stage and rehearsing. They had a lot of punk rock extras for the shoot. Jagger shows up. I didn't know he was in the shoot. He was there because he wrote the song, and to support Midler. And she sees me on the ladder, and she yells to one of her assistants, "Who's that guy?" She didn't know me. Jagger did at that point. And someone said, "We don't know." And she said, "Well, get him out of here." And Jagger leaned over and said to her, "No, that's Joey Stevens. He's a really good photographer. Leave him here." She said, "Okay." So Jagger saved me. That's Freddie Mercury, formerly from Queen. We're in Green Park in London. Beautiful day. And we're doing pictures. And he's very nice, and no one's bothering us. And we begin to lose light. It's like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And so he says to me, it looks like we're finished taking pictures because I was shooting available light. He said, "You fancy a cup of tea?" Using his mother's voice. And I said, "Yes." And we went to Harrod's tea room. And it was glorious, and chandeliers and beautiful silverware and stuff, and wonderful cakes and tea service. We sat there, and he played to the old ladies having their tea. Whenever he noticed that they were all watching him, because they had black fingernail polish. Yeah. And he worked with them, and they didn't know who he was, and they could care less. They just thought he was delightful. Yeah, very talented guy, fantastic voice. We miss him. David Bowie, Radio City Music Hall, probably 1973. The Thin Man Duke show or something. He had different names for different tours, and that was one of them. So I was on that one, and the next night we were in Cleveland, and then Philadelphia. He was an amazing performer. He still is. This guy here, his name is the Amazing Orlando. He's a blind British dance instructor and a dancer. And Bowie needed to learn some dance steps that he'd seen Orlando do. So he hired him. And at that point, he put him in the show. An amazing guy, couldn't sing. There's Bowie in the middle. Lisa Robinson on the left. She's right now she's the music critic for the Vanity Fair magazine. And she's the head of that department. And the kid on the right with the cigarette is he's the bass player in the Clash, good friend of mine. So we went to see Iggy Pop play in some club in New York, and Bowie was pretending to be hitting on Lisa. They'd known each other like 20 years, and she just thought it was fun. It wasn't serious at all. But I noticed, putting my pictures together, there was a lot of cigarette smoking in those days.
Good old days.
There's Bowie doing the Midnight Special. It was a TV show, very popular in the 70s and 80s, coming out of New York, and then it was televised worldwide. It was a weekly show, all kinds of rock and roll, live tapings. And here he comes out in a net shirt with gold plastic hands glued to his chest, and the audience went nuts. They said, oh, Bowie's the best. Yeah. And he was very good. That's, this picture sort of confuses people. That's my bathtub in London. It was a 7-footer. So my girlfriend and I, we could both get in it because there wasn't enough hot water for two different tubs. So we get in it and we bathe and we go off and be busy photographers. One time I get a call to take pictures of this guy. That's Peter Gabriel. And he's just starting his solo career. And they sent him over, and the paper that I was working for wanted to put him on the cover. They already had the interview. So he comes up the stairs. I didn't know him. He comes up the stairs to my studio, and he says to me, he says, "Do you have a bathtub?" I said, "Yeah." He's a British guy from Bath. I said, "Yeah, why?" And he said, "I'll be in the bathtub. And do you have a bubble stuff?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "I'll be in there. Give me 5 minutes." So I came down with the strobes, and I took these pictures. And he'd already gotten the bubbles going. He didn't smoke. He found a cigarette butt in an ashtray in the bathroom. And he might have looked like a working stiff. He'd just come home after working really hard, digging ditches, and now he's going to soak in the tub and smoke a cigarette. Maybe he'd look at a porn magazine. That's Elton John at the Hammersmith Odeon in London. Christmas show. Very, very nice guy. He bought a football team, a soccer team, and invited us all out on British Rail to Watford, it was a team, to go see the team. So we're in the dressing room where the players were, his team, and he'd already been there for different games. He was scouting out whether he should buy the team or not. He did. He bought the arena, everything. And I'm standing next to him. We're about to leave the dressing room and go into the arena. It's packed with like 40,000 kids, fans. And he said, "Watch this, Joey." And I said, "What?" He said, "Just watch it." He went out, and 40,000 people yelled out, "Poofta!" And he just smiled, and he loved it because they bought tickets to say that. Led Zeppelin at Earl Court Arena. Yeah, I don't have much to say about it. It was a really good show, great music, arena rock, and very, very British. The guy on the right is Robert Plant. The guy on the left, that's Jimmy Page. The guy on the right, he's a classic British, fluttering the eyelashes and moving his hair around. He's very girl-like. But actually, I hung out with him, he wasn't at all. He just loved doing that on stage. That's Janis Joplin and Tina Turner. This is a bit dark, this picture. I'm watching Tina Turner and Ike on stage at Madison Square Garden, and I could see a white hat behind the amplifiers. So I was wondering who that was. And Tina calls this girl out to sing a couple of numbers. It's Janis. And they tear the house down. And they're the middle act. It was B.B. King, Ike and Tina Turner. And then they left the stage and we're all exhausted from screaming our heads off. I took a look at all the people in the row that I'm seated near. It was the entire Andy Warhol crowd.
Oh my God.
And we're all completely brain dead from screaming our heads off because of all of this. And then we all collectively, 20,000 of us, realized the Stones haven't come out yet. They did. It was a great night. That's Neil Young. They threw a birthday party for some nightclub in London. And yeah, I don't know what to say about that. The picture tells a story. Oh, getting back to Gabriel, just a second. Some kids saw that picture in our art gallery that I did an exhibit in. Thanks, Tom. And they came over to me and they said, "You took the picture?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "How come?" The kid said to me, he said, "How come he's in your bathtub?" And I'm straight. But I was trying to answer that question, so I said, "Okay." And then he looked at me and he said, "Nice talking to you." That's Eric Clapton, the great guitarist. He used to be in Cream, one of the best bands ever. And he's got dirty fingernails. He's rolled his own cigarette. He's having a confab with Pete Townsend and Elton John. We'll see that in another picture. Here's Pete and Elton. Very early, these guys. Elton was just starting out. There's Pete. He was the lead guitarist in The Who, one of the greatest British bands I've ever seen. Fantastic songs. That's Carly Simon and James Taylor. She's pregnant. And it was 1971. I don't think she knew that she shouldn't drink being pregnant. She also shouldn't have been hanging out with him because he smoked in the same room with her. So it was early. We didn't know that much. We were smarter than that. And so he split for a while, and I didn't know her, but I got nervous. I wanted to say something. I didn't want to act like a dummy. So I said to her, "This is a gorgeous hotel." It was in the middle of Paris. A petite hotel, not a massive place. And I said, "This is a gorgeous hotel." And she said, I'm going to curse now. She said, "Yeah, you know, and I'm a big shot, and it took us 2 fucking years to get a room here." That's Joey Ramone, a punk band from New York. Joey Ramone from the Ramones, very good friend. They lived around the corner from CBGB's, one of the nightclubs, so I took a lot of pictures of that. The birth of American punk rock. It was a good time for me because whether you like punk rock, the music, the lifestyle, what they did off stage and stuff like, it never concerned me. The pictures were just amazing. I couldn't believe some of the stuff I was seeing. He's pretending to be knifing me. He's a sweetheart. We never did anything of the sort. That's the beautiful Debbie Harry from Blondie. She was playing at CBGB's that night. I took this picture outdoors, outside the club. Now, inside the club, I was talking to her, getting to know her. She was about to go on stage again for the second set. And so I ordered 2 beers, 2 Heinekens. I threw down some money. And the bartender said, "You can't buy her a drink." Turns out at that time you had to be 18. She was 17 and a half. And so I thought that was really, she was allowed to sing in a bar, but she wasn't allowed to drink anything. That's pre-bikini wax.
I knew you were going to say that.
That's it, at the Playground. Very talented lady she was. She wasn't just a punk rock singer and a beauty. She could sing. And a nice person too. Never chose to get married, but straight. She's still straight, right? Straight and unmarried now. She could care less about that whole process.
That's good to know.
This is the world famous Sex Pistols, my all-time favorite rock and roll band, out of England. They were hired. They were sort of discovered by this guy Malcolm McLaren, sitting around a jukebox in his clothing store. He designed clothes and T-shirts and everything else. And he never managed anything except a store in his life. But one day he decided he wanted to manage a band. So he saw these 4 ragamuffins on the floor smoking cigarettes and annoying the customers in the store. He said, "You 4, you could be in the band. What's your name over there?" To the guy on the left. He said, "Johnny." He said, "You'll be Johnny Rotten. What about you with the fingers in the air?" And he said, I think John Ritchie said, "My name's John Ritchie." He said, "You'll be Sid Vicious." And they became a band. They learned how to play a little bit, This Sid, he's fresh out of jail. He killed his girlfriend. He's got the hospital tag, cigarette burns on his arm, hand-me-down clothes because the cops took all his clothes away with blood on him. It's a bad story. Very sad. Very sad. That's the Pistols beating the hell out of the audience. Oh, you come to see me? I'm gonna beat the hell out of you. That girl with the blonde hair, the punker on the right, during the show, she punched Sid in the nose, and the blood just gushed all over the place. And he smiled, and he laughed, and he continued playing it, had the time of his life. And he wrote things on his chest with the blood. A lot of fun. That's one of the first Sex Pistols gigs ever. They worked in a strip joint in some little club in London. That's Susie from Susie and the Banshee, the girl in the middle. Could get arrested taking pictures like that now. That's there's Patti Smith and Bruce Springsteen, and then on the left is a guy called Jimmy Iovine. He formed. He's a producer, recording producer. He formed Interscope Records, so he signed Lady Gaga, U2. He produced Springsteen, and then he was asked to produce Smith. And he asked Springsteen if he could lift one of the songs that he knew that Springsteen had written and give it to Patti, because he had a feeling that Patti could convert it into a #1 hit. He was right. And it became her only #1. So I sort of introduced all three of them, because I knew them from different moments. That's Alice Cooper. So I was assigned to take a picture of him for the cover of my newspaper. And the plan was I'd meet him in the lobby of his hotel in London. And he's there. It's a nice lobby, plants and windows and light and stuff. And he's sitting there. And he's sitting in that chair, and it's looking like it's going to be a really boring photo session. Thank you very much. He's just sitting there with a short-neck Budweiser bottle, and I'm thinking, oh God, what do I do? And in my bag, I had some original T-shirts that some guy had given me, 2 of them. And I was reaching into the bag to get another lens, and he was watching me. Alice Cooper was. He said, "What's that?" And I said, "What?" He said, "That." And he saw the shirt. I said, "Oh, you just saved the photo session." He put it on, and he wore it at the theater that night for a show. Otherwise, you wouldn't be looking at this picture. It would be a really boring picture. This is fun. I'm really enjoying this. You okay? Next door neighbor, Grace Jones, the great Grace Jones. I lived in the West Village. She had a loft around the corner, and she was a singer. She worked a lot of discos and stuff from Studio 54, and she'd invite me over for coffee, and she'd say, "Get the coffee, get the bagels, get the cream cheese, get the lox, get the newspapers, and I'll do some fresh orange juice. Get over here quick." So. And don't forget the mail. So I had to come to a mailbox. So that's what you do when you're a good neighbor. So I grabbed the mail and everything else and went up there. And we looked through our respective piles of mail. Mine from my place in my bag, and hers on the counter. We're drinking and having bagels and lox. And her mail didn't turn out to be loaded with great invites to events going on that night, which she expected all the time. She was big shot. So I went through my mail. My mail was better than hers. She said, what are we going to do tonight? I said, well, we're not a date. We're not an item. You can do whatever. You're a big shot star. I'm just a photographer. She said, yeah, but you got the better mail today. Where are we going? And so I told her that there was a bowling alley that opened. And they turned it into a nightclub. It was funny lighting and door admission. I took her to that. She people thought I was dating her from then on. Well, Joe Stevens and Grace Jones, you know what I mean? But it wasn't like that. We're just good neighbors. Bagels and logs. I swear. Great haircut.
Great lights.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, that was my studio there. She called me when she got a fresh haircut. Then we did stuff in the Bahamas, pictures in the Bahamas. And then took pictures of her first child, Apollinaire. Nice lady. People think she's a bit scary. She just photographs that way. But she's a wonderful lady. From Buffalo, New York. Really?
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Fantastic lips, Jesus. This is like the birth of rap music in the Bronx. Just in the first couple of weeks, it was starting to bubble and appear and be in clubs and get recorded. And this is the guy that gave birth to all of it. His name is Grandmaster Flash. And he had a group called the Furious Five. And he lived in tenements like that, Desolation Row. I went up there with a writer and I photographed him. We went to a gig last night, that night. And they played in some little club in the Bronx. Went on to, he created rap music. Whether you like it or not, he's the guy. That's Michael Jackson when he was a nice boy. Before all the skin treatments and going white and messing with his hair and all that stuff and doing all his drugs. He was just a nice boy. And he's posing in front of a picture of himself in his manager's office in LA. And he was watching me setting up strobes in his manager's office on Sunset Strip. And I heard boxes of strobes, and he's listening to Edith Piaf. That's the album over there. But he's watching me. I just flown in from New York to do this. And so, then I finally got the lights going, and I plugged them all in. They worked, and then the family, the Jackson family, was going to come in and get photographed. And he was watching me, and he said, "Hey man, you have a bad back, don't you?" Because I sat down very gingerly, and he noticed that. And I said, "Yeah, how'd you notice?" She said, "I saw the way you just sat down." I said, "Yeah, I blew it out carrying these strobes from JFK onto the plane, off the plane, to here to your manager's office." And he said, "Yeah, me too. I have a bad back, but I take medication for it." I said, "This is a long time before you got into drugs." I said, "Yeah, that's a temptation, but I go to a chiropractor. You don't want to get hooked on these drugs, painkillers. That's eventually some of the stuff that killed him." But he was a nice kid then. And you see that white mark on his face? At that time, they didn't do zit cream. They didn't do Clearasil for black people. And that was white Clearasil. So he said, "What are you shooting, color or black and white?" I said, "Black and white on this roll, why?" He said, "Would you spot touch my zit cream?" I said, "What if I don't?" He said, "What am I going to do, get my lawyer after you?" And I said, "You could." But I wanted to keep it honest, and so you get to see it. Michael Jackson's Clearasil cream.
How old was he there, would you say?
Huh?
How old would you say he was?
21.
21.
Yeah. That's Prince. He came in from Minnesota. And I didn't think they had black people in Minnesota. I already skied at Vail, and the whole town at one point was all of the kids from Minnesota, all white. So I figured that's just it. And then Bob Dylan was from there, another white. And some politicians that I knew about were from there, I think Hubert Humphrey. And then he shows up. And I was stunned at first, but I heard his music that night in some club, and I've been hooked on him ever since. A great musician. And he plays everything. Fantastic musician. That's Bob Marley. He's singing with his band, Bob Marley and the Wailers at the Lyceum in London. Probably the greatest reggae performer of all time. I'm shooting from an orchestra pit in this theater, and a friend of mine, another photographer, shows up with this Hasselblad camera where you have to look into it this way to see what you're shooting. And that's not an ideal piece of equipment for shooting rock and roll. You really need a 35 You can look right through it. You can see trouble coming off from the side of the camera. And so I said to him, "Have you lost your mind, Bob?" His name was Bob Ellis. I said, "Have you lost your mind? What are you doing with that camera? It's too bulky. It's too big. You have to stick your arms out to look at it." He said, "I'm shooting the cover." And I noticed the sound truck outside the gig. And that confirmed that he was shooting the cover for the album. It's called, you can see it now, you can buy it now. Bob Marley and the Wells live at the Lyceum. So we gave him a lot of room because he was walking around like this, with his elbows out. It looked like he was going to take off. So Bob's Rastafari and his dreadlocks started getting wet and moving around, and they become part of the show after like the third number. And he's moving his head around, and they backlit him, and it's fantastic to photograph. But we let Bob get the ace positions. We could get good pictures. We didn't have to be right in the exact spot. And so we saw him get in the right spot. He had his camera, he's like this. And at that moment, he hits the shutter. We're watching the show. We all yelled out, "Cover!" And it was. Lovely guy. That's Chuck Berry at Carnegie Hall. The young Chuck Berry. Not much to say, I love that picture. You get to see the proscenium stage and the beauty of Carnegie Hall.
Do you remember the song?
No, but it was all the ones that we were raised on and that we loved. No.
Okay.
No. And so someone, I read a caption. I wrote a caption for that picture in the magazine. And in the caption, I asked a question: "Who's the guitarist over there?" The bass player. And because I didn't know, and at that time I wasn't a professional journalist getting captions and talking to people, and I was just beginning. So, but you're supposed to do that. You're supposed to get everyone mentioned in the picture, get the caption. And so someone brought the magazine to Chuck in St. Louis. That's where he lives now.
Right.
He's from there. And they said to him, "This guy who took this picture of you would love to know who your bass player is." And all he said was, "That's Chick." So to this day, no one knows who the Chick was, but if Chuck said it, that's good enough. That's Muddy Waters. I went to his house in Chicago after he finished a tour. And he lived with his daughter, his young daughter, and there was a Cadillac purring away outside in his yard, in the snowfield. And it was purring away while we were doing the interview and the photos. And so when there was a little bit of a break, I said to Mr. Waters, I said, "Is that your car out there, Mr. Waters?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "How come it's running?" He said, "Well, when I get rid of you two guys," I'm the journalist, "when I get rid of you two guys, see, I've been on the road, and now I just got back. So I'm going to go downtown in that car that's purring away, because it hasn't been running 2 months. I'm going to get in that car, I'm going to go downtown, I'm going to get myself a haircut." I'm going to curse him again now. "I'm going to get downtown, get a haircut, get some whiskey, and some pussy."
Admirable.
Get your priorities in order. That's going to help you. That's the great Johnny Cash. I wish is Pink right here. He would know who the other guitarist is.
Chick.
They're tuning up for a gig downstairs in Carnegie Hall, same show that Chuck was doing. And I was told, "Stay out of the dressing rooms." But I don't obey too many laws like that. So I took these pictures of them tuning. You can see the neck of the guitar and the wires coming from it, the strings. They need to be clipped. And so guitarists like that guy, he keep wire cutters in his guitar case. But they were so nervous about this gig, this Carnegie Hall gig, and dirty projectors know what I'm talking about. They didn't notice me taking pictures, And the guitarist was headed downstairs onto the stage of Carnegie Hall with all the wires going. And I heard Cash turn to him and said, "Charlie, you better get some wire cutters." And they clipped them off and they had them all on the staircase. They went off and did the gig. But later we all had coffee across the street from Madison Square Garden, some coffee shop, all of us, the entire cast. And I happened to be facing Mr. Cash. I didn't know him. So I photographed the show and I photographed all the stuff in the dressing room. And Cash looks at me and he said, "What do you do, boy?" I said, "I'm a photographer. You didn't see me running around taking pictures?" "No." He said, "Where were you, in the front?" I said, "Yeah, no, I was upstairs too." He said, "What do you mean upstairs?" I said, "I was in your dressing room." They didn't remember seeing me at all. They were so entranced and so nervous about the gig, they could care less about some jerk running around taking pictures. That's Joe Strummer, the great Joe Strummer, the lead singer in The Clash, a punk rock band out of England, probably the very best. I took that in Ocho Rios in Jamaica. He passed away about 10 years ago. Very good friend. He had my phone number when I moved back to New York, because I lived in London for 10 years. And he had my phone number, and I knew they were coming to do gigs in America. I wasn't sure about what the dates were. And I got a call one day at my pad, right around the corner from Grace Jones. And it's Joe. I said, "Joe, where are you?" He said, I'm in New York." I said, "Where are you?" He said, "At the Royalton Hotel." I said, "Great, I'll come up." He said, No, I'm sick of this hotel. I'm sick of hanging out in hotels. I'm sick of all of this stuff." He said, "Can I come to your place?" I said, "Sure." He said, "Where do you live?" I said, "Greenwich Village." He said, "How do I get there?" I said, "You go downstairs. I know the Royalton. Go downstairs, talk to the doorman. He'll get you a taxi. Tell him where you want to go. It's 102 West Houston Street, and you'll be there in about 20 minutes, 30 minutes. And he said, No, I can't do that." I said, "Why?" He said, "Well, I don't like taking taxis. I'm sick of them. What subway do I take?" I said, "Joe, you've never been on New York Subway. It's your first day in New York." And I gave him instructions: F train, IND. I get off at West 4th Street. What streets to cut through to get up to my house. 20 minutes later, he was there. He was a guy, a big time pop star, but he took the underground and lived in London. And so he said to me, he said, "Joe Stevens," he said, "do you have a car?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Let's go someplace." I said, "Where?" He said, "Let's go to Spanish Harlem." So I took him to Spanish Harlem. And I said, "What else do you want to do, Joe?" And he said, "I love a beer and I love some pop." So I took him to a bodega, a grocery store in Puerto Rico on the east side. And I said, just watch, don't buy anything. Don't reach into your pocket, just watch and listen to what's going on. And I walked over to the counter with 2 bottles of Heineken. The guy put them in a bag. I threw down a 20, and the guy threw in a bag of pot. That's how you score. If you want to go to New York, that's how you do it. Oh, okay, this is the last slide. This is a little bit of a bummer, but this is Belfast, Northern Ireland. I fancied myself with the camera being a war photographer long before I was a music photographer. And so I covered wars. A lot of stuff in the United States, wars involving, let's get rid of Richard Nixon, all the demonstrations and the tear gassings and all that stuff. I'd already done that in SDS, Chicago, Days of Rage. I'd done all of that. Then I moved to England and I did an assignment for Rolling Stone magazine in Belfast while the wars were going, early 70s. And that's a burned out bus and people were killed in that. One day I was downtown staying at a hotel and we heard a bang go off. So all the professional journalists and photographers, they knew exactly, from the sound of it, they knew where the explosion was. So we went there and I learned something about covering with cameras. War, that kind of war. You have to wait until dust settles, otherwise you don't get any pictures. You just wait and it goes down and you get pictures and you see all this carnage. So I was running around wondering where the building stopped. Everything was so white and dusty. And I was jumping over stuff. I couldn't figure out what it was. I thought it was bricks. And it looked like a bomb had gone off in a department store, but I couldn't tell. I heard people screaming. when the dust finally settled, I could see I was jumping over body parts. And I stopped being a war photographer that day. I realized I don't have the makings for that. That's, to pay my rent, to cover pictures, to take pictures of people in death, just didn't appeal to me. It's sort of like what happened on the marathon London. Yeah. Terrible. So I ceased that. I went back to London because that's where I lived, and continued being really poor. And someone hired me to do some music stuff, and I realized maybe this is the best bet for me because I don't have the makings of being a war photographer. I wasn't brave enough. And the other thing about being a good war photographer, you have to be crazy. Thanks. No, I'm gonna go there.
You want to come sit over here? So I deliberately didn't do an introduction of Joe because I wanted to just dive right in and let him tell you his stories. But I really would like to start off the Q&A by letting Joe take us back. Would you go back to, how did you get started?
Before I went over to do that war stuff, I had already run coffee shops with live entertainment in Greenwich Village. So I knew something about dealing with musicians and people with their guitars and their careers and writing songs and getting record deals and stuff like that. I knew a lot about that. And then I decided to try to get into photography and do war photography. When I saw that that wasn't going to happen, in and around that time, Woodstock occurred. And I knew a lot of people who were involved in that. John Sebastian, Felix Papalotti, Tim Hardin, Gracie Slick from the Jefferson Airplane. I knew Janice, right? And so I thought, bringing cameras to Woodstock and take some pictures. And it launched me. Because people came up to me and they said, so you're a big shot photographer? I said, no, I'm just starting. Why? They said, we'd love to have your pictures. So I got my pictures published almost immediately from Woodstock on that day. And I never looked back.
Is it true your date at Woodstock was named Groovy?
How did you hear that? Yeah. Quick story on her. I knew her from upstate New York. She was an upstate girl. She dropped a hit of acid. She stole the family truck. She drove to Woodstock, crashed the truck into some farmer's tree, abandoned the truck, walked the rest of the way to the site, saw me. I was backstage. She was a great distance away. She kept yelling out, Joe, Joe, Joe. And I was wondering, who is that? So I looked into the crowd. I could see her on the fence there. I got her in. She tripped out of her head. And we decided, at another point I was taking pictures, then some band was on, I was interested in photograph. We decided to go into the woods to do the nasty. So I had a sleeping bag. I really had a sleeping bag. and so I'm dragging the sleeping bag, and I've left the cameras in the care of some people backstage. I didn't want to get them all muddied up and stuff. And we're walking down this path, and her name is Groovy, my girlfriend. And there are kids on the path doing it. And the photograph of Woodstock, I didn't take it, I didn't have my camera. The photograph that covered Woodstock beautifully. Forget about all the stuff, people in the pond, all nude, all the stuff with Joe Cocker on stage. And that's, a lot of people did that and took those pictures. But this one shot I missed. There's a girl doing it on the ground, and she's watching me walk by. And she looks up, and she goes, hi, Mimi.
So you should have had your camera.
Oh, God. Yeah.
All right, so after that, then how you were in New York, then you were in London. What happened first? How did you get started?
I'm in New York, so I was in New York, and then I did Woodstock, and then I got hired by Rolling Stone. They knew me as a music photographer, but I really wasn't. And so I convinced them that they got the wrong guy. And they didn't buy it, but they said, okay, and they thought they could draw me in. They knew I was going to London, so they were thinking about getting me to shoot for them out of London, thinking that, well, he's a Yank, he'll have an easier time. He'll know
And what
he's
brought you to London? It was just that it was the invasion, you
Oh.
decided, I want to be there?
I had a girlfriend,
Oh.
and she, in New York, and she received the first, Chris Hislop will tell you that's the story. She received one of the early credit cards in the mail, unsolicited. She didn't ask for anything. She had an account with Chemical Bank. That's it. She never asked for any plastic. She didn't know what plastic was. I mean, plastic credit cards. And so a MasterCard card came in the mail. She inquired as to what it did. And she said to me, she said, let's go. I said, go where? She said, let's get sushi. I said, yeah, we can do that. And you want to put it on the card? She said, yeah. And I said, but there's a problem with those things. He said, because I knew. The problem is you have to pay in 30 days. They don't like you if you don't pay. They tack on interest. But kids and people, a lot of people around that time, they didn't know anything about that. They just thought it was great not having money and throwing down plastic and being a big shot. And so we had sushi. We had sushi. And then in the restaurant, she yelled out, I got it! And I said, what do you got? She said, let's buy a ticket to London. And Chris wrote it. He said, Joe giggles and cracks up and says, yeah, let's do it. And I did. I thought it was a great idea. I wanted to see London again.
And what year was that?
70. And we flew there, and I noticed on the plane it was a one-way ticket for me. She was making sure that I didn't misbehave. And if I misbehaved, she was going to dump me there, strand me in London, and she did. So I lived there for 10 years.
So that means you misbehaved.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I did.
Do you want to hear about that?
Yeah. Would you cut it?
So what was your first gig in London? First shooting gig?
Probably some outdoor hippie festival with some dodgy British bands in the mud. I forget the names of some of the bands because they're not too well known now, but they were really good. Like a lot of Grateful Dead kind of bands. They go on forever, and you want to shoot yourself. The Grateful Dead were like that. A lot of people say, I can't take it anymore.
And from there?
There was a guy at this very wet hippie festival. I think it was called the Wheelie Festival. There was a guy selling paper sleeping bags. And it looked like I was going to be sleeping there. And I had no place to sleep, and it was getting cold. And there was a tent, so I figured if I could find like a blanket or something, I might be all right. And this guy was selling paper sleeping bags that had like insulation in it for like £1, £1. So I bought one, and my girlfriend got in with me. It was a one-person sleeping bag. We destroyed that thing. Boom!
Okay.
And I took pictures of pop stars and British hippies misbehaving.
Yeah.
Great fun.
So I remember you telling me a story about how you had a studio and people would just show up. Somebody would be told, just go to see Joe Stevens.
Yeah, yeah.
So tell us about that.
Well, there was one band from Glasgow, Scotland, and I've always been very biased and partial to people from Glasgow because my mother was born there. So I'm always very fair to them and accommodating. And there's a band called the Revillos from Glasgow. And they were sent to my studio, and they showed up in these, I wish I had the picture here. They showed up at these amazing outfits, 7 of them. Afro hair and Mohicans and all these crazy colors. They got out of a taxi dressed like that, and that's all they had. That's how they dressed when they were dressed on the plane coming over. That's how they dressed at the airport coming into the city, in the taxi and coming to my house. And now they're coming up the stairs of my apartment to my studio. And my landlord, who's a little bit mafia, not really, but I mean, he knew the right thing. He's coming out of his flat, he lives below me, and they scared him. He'd never seen anything, he didn't know what the hell it was. He thought, this is aliens. This is what they talk about. And the Revillos came in, and I took pictures of them, And I didn't know there was an encounter with the landlord. I missed that. They hadn't arrived at my place yet. And then they split, and they made a lot of noise, but they were nice kids, and the pictures are amazing, the color stuff. And the phone rings, and it's my landlord, and he says, "Joe, what was that?" Yeah, people would come up and they'd say, "Take our picture." And if I had the time and the film, sure, when, especially if they look good.
So, but at the same time that you had your own studio, you also were shooting for different magazines,
Yeah,
newspapers. and-
the British one that was mentioned on the screen, the NME UK, that's a high circulating, it still comes out now, weekly. Highest circulating weekly in the world right now. And so I worked for them up there, and then I moved back to New York, and I took the paper with me. So I ran it out of my apartment. And so they paid the rent, and the writers would come over and they'd stay with me. And then pop stars would stay with me. It became a well-known hangout for crazy people.
Now, back in the day, how did you get your film to them? I mean, I remember a long time ago when I would shoot, like for the Globe, you'd have to meet the bus.
Courier
Put the
service.
You have to put the film
Yeah.
in the package, send it down the bus.
Oh, no, I wouldn't.
So how would you do it?
I wouldn't risk giving the film to anyone.
What would you do?
I processed and printed all
You
myself.
processed everything, okay.
And I dry it and mark it up with the captions on the back, shove it into envelopes with other stuff, write articles written, and a guy would come, they call him a courier, and he had like a big leather bag, and he'd shove all this stuff into the leather bag, and he'd thank me, and he'd split, and he'd go to Kennedy Airport, and he'd fly to London, and he'd walk around London giving people all these packages. That's what he does, and that's a way to see the world being a courier, because someone else pays the bill. And I think you can stay there for a couple of weeks, and then they want you to come into the office and fly back to New York. And so that's how I did it. Now it's digital. I get pictures out in about 14 seconds.
Do you miss the darkroom?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Because it's art.
Yeah.
The stuff I do now is, the pictures are art, but the process is too easy. I feel guilty.
Yeah, I want to open it up. I know everybody here has questions for Joe about, you know, any photographs that they saw or history. Chris Hislop.
I got one, Joe. I don't know if we can fire up the photo presentation again, but I don't know if I saw the photo of Alice Cooper before with the T-shirt on.
Yeah.
And you said that that T-shirt was in your bag.
You want me to talk about that?
Well,
Because
no.
you know it's a dirty story.
Well, sure. Well, sure. But a few photos back, when you showed the photo of the Sex Pistols in the club beating the hell out of the crowd,
Steve Jones.
Yeah, wearing the same shirt.
Yeah. I gave them out at some point because I took the picture. Right?
Yeah.
And they didn't call them tits over, they call them Bristols. So one day I knew a guy, he was a silk screen artist. So he rang me, British kid.
Yep.
And he'd do original, he'd do like limited edition, 20 or 30 of them, that's it. And he'd move the silk screen around, so each one is slightly different colors. So he rang me and he said, "Got any pictures of Bristols, Joe Stevens, big shot photographer from New York, American?" I said, "Yeah, cut it out. Yeah, what kind of pictures are you looking for?" He said, "I just asked you, what are you, bleeding death? Bristols." And I said, "Oh, those things, yeah, why?" He said, "Well, send me an 8x10, black and white. I don't want color. I'll do color. I'll put on the color. I'm the silk screen guy." So I sent him a couple prints of my girlfriend's Bristols. And about 2 weeks later, he delivered that bag that Alice Cooper saw in my camera bag. So and they made a fortune out of those Bristols. I got like 8 T-shirts out of it.
So was Alice Cooper first, or was that?
Alice was the first,
All
and
right.
Steve Jones was next.
That's awesome. All right. I'm into it.
But Alice he used it on stage that night, and it was photographed by everyone under the sun. So the news got out about that shirt right away.
Did your girlfriend know?
Did your girlfriend get any royalty from it?
That's a great question.
I don't know if she knows that it's her Bristols on the shirt. I did see her later, but she didn't confront me with, "Well, you're making a lot of money with my," but she didn't, so
Is the
she may not have
statute
recognized
run out?
her beautiful tits. And the name of the company was Tit Tees.
That's
That's cute.
Is it possible
I didn't
to
think
show
this
that
thing was
photo
gonna
again?
turn into such a dirty little section.
You started it with the sleeping.
I'm working on it.
Yeah, we're working on it, working on showing it again.
Alright.
I'm sorry, Denise, what'd you say?
Didn't you live with Chrissy Hyde for a little while when you were in London?
What?
Did you live with Chrissy Hine?
Well, we didn't live together. Katie Simon, my girlfriend at the time, another photographer, she did the first Clash cover. She did Kaya for Bob Marley, wonderful photographer. She was running around London one day. We were trying to do the same thing, get out of America and become successful photographers somewhere else. And she ran into this young lady somewhere, and that young lady was Chrissy Hynde, but it was like 3 years before she formed the Pretenders major league band. It was played at the music hall last year. Chrissy was living in a squat, which means you cop the electricity from wires coming in from telephone poles. You may have some heat, may not. You live in this desolation row, sort of like Grandmaster Flash background. And so she lived in one of those, and she cleaned offices for a living at that time. And so Katie said to her, she said, so where do you go to take a bath? She said, different friends. And so Katie loved her. She was a great chick. She said, oh, one of your baths each day, you should take a bath every day. Come to our place. Here's my address. So she showed up, and she was in the shower, in that tub that you saw in the Peter Gabriel pictures. And Katie heard her singing and encouraged her to pursue a music career, and she did.
It all started in his bathtub.
In that that was Katie's, yeah.
That's awesome. Did you have your hand up? Yeah.
Yeah, who's your favorite performer to hang out with?
Bowie. But Mr. Sentimental, you don't come up to him and say, boy, didn't we have a good time at the nightclub the other night? He's not into anything from the past, so you just leave it out. And when he sees you, he's thinking about, who is that now? When he saw me the last time, he had a whole conversation about Curlian photography that he read about in some magazine, some strange photography, some strange film, sort of in the area of infrared. But there was no way he was going to talk about, boy, didn't we have a great time in Chicago with all those girls? No way. So you learn to deal with that. I'm in the past, I'm in the future, but very interesting guy, very intelligent. And if he knows you're not a musician, like he knows, he didn't belabor me with guitar chords and different riffs that they had to get together in a recording studio, because I wouldn't understand what the hell he's talking about. But experiencing the world and what's happening in the future and problems with countries and poverty, love to talk about. Nice guy.
What was the first time you shot him? How did that come about?
At a TV show in London called The Russell Hardy Show, and I think I was kamikazing it. I don't think I had a proper photo pass, and I was shooting and hoping no one would see me.
That's so surprising.
But it turns out his people saw me and they said, "You taking pictures for the magazine?" I said, "Yeah." And they said, "Could we have a look at it?" Some of them later, David, were like, he was wearing, he had to do 3 numbers, and he had 3 different outfits. And the outfits were amazing, just jackets, but very beautiful. And so they brought me backstage after he was finished. Oh, no, he'd already done 1 number. And he'd done a terrible song on acoustic guitar called My Death. So I get backstage, I've never spoken to him in my life, and I was not about to kiss his butt just because he's a pop star. That's not my game. Let the people who work for him do that. And I get back there, and he said, "Joe Stevens, nice to meet you. My name is David." I said, "Yeah." And he said, "What'd you think of that number?" I said, "Mr. Bowie," he said, "Call me David." He said, "Give me a break." I said to him, I said, "Give me a break. My death on television? What are you thinking?" He said, "Yeah, it was a bad choice. Maybe we could get it cut out of it." They were doing tape. But he's fascinating, man. And his crew are always coming up with wild haircuts. So if you're a photographer and you're close to that operation, you're a winner.
You've always got something new. So here's Chris's photo.
Yeah, show the Sex Pistols photo where they're beating up the crowd, and notice the band with the same shirt.
This guy here, he doesn't talk about rock and roll either. He talks about golf. I know nothing about golf. I don't care about golf.
Didn't he used to run marathons?
Did he? I don't know.
Alice Cooper?
I don't know. Very straight guy. You think you're hanging out with Joe Collins. But you have to keep reminding yourself, that's Alice Cooper. So I told my mom, she saw that picture, she said, who's that with those things on his chest? I said, it's Alice Cooper. She said, no, it isn't, that's a guy.
Scroll.
Here it is.
Oh, there it
Yeah.
is, that's right.
Yeah, yeah, good catch there.
How did you see that?
So, other questions? I see a question here, yeah.
Joe, very enjoyable, totally.
Oh, thank you.
Obviously, you enjoyed a very boring life. But my question is, and this could be a long and short answer, is do you miss those times?
I still do a bit of it now. I did Lady Gaga last year at Madison Square Garden. I was gonna do her again, but then she hurt her hip. So all us photographers are waiting for her to get well. I do a bit in New York, some in Boston. I photographed the 30 projectors in Boston last December, I think. And I was just in Brooklyn taking pictures of Hasidic Jews and hipsters. So I still, yeah, I take pictures. The thing about photography is, just around the time they shove your ass into a grave, you're still taking pictures. It's not like you're going into some guy's basement and fixing the phone. Laying out your knees, you know. You just hit the shutter. If you have the whim, if you have the muse, and you see things you want to photograph. I still do.
Other, yeah, here's a
That's David
question.
Mendelsohn, one of the best photographers in the whole state.
Yeah, nice to have you here today.
Is there anyone that you want, that you've always wanted to photograph and haven't?
I had a photo pass. I was driving the people at RCA in New York crazy, the press department, through the late 70s for a photo pass to do Elvis. Because I lived in England for 10 years, he never played there. I thought he would, he never did. In fact, he never played England at all.
Wow.
And so I kept driving him nuts, because he'd do little tours, but they would never give me a photo pass and fly me there. So I was trying to arrange for a magazine to pay the bill, and I'd tell the people at RCA, okay, he's playing Chicago, you give me a photo pass? But it never came about. I think they were just trying to pinpoint me into a gig near New York, which makes sense, it's financially sensible. So they called me one day and they said, Long Island Coliseum where the Islanders play, big arena, it's still there, Elvis! Guess what? I had to go up there and get a pass for it. It was a barcode. It was a long time before barcodes and stuff. But they had the early stages of barcode. They photographed me in color, big color-coded thing, and it was a piece of art. And my picture, he fucking died. So about a year later, some guy called me and he said, I heard you had a photo pass for that gig. I said, how'd you hear that? He said, I know what's going on. I said, who are you? And he said, I'm not going to tell you. He said, but if we meet up, I'm going to give you a lot of money. I said, for what? He said, I want that photo pass. And I sold it to him. Big mistake. But at the time, I was broke.
Any other questions? Yeah, Gail.
Yeah, hi. Hi, this has been great. I love this. This is
Hi.
fabulous. I enjoyed talking to you last night, too.
Thanks.
I was interested in Warhol. Did you hang out with Warhol at all in the Foundry and
yeah.
did things with the interview? And
Hanging out with Warhol is like hanging out with a cardboard cutout of Warhol. He doesn't say much. And I've got a picture of myself with him. And he's standing right there, and people look at it and say, is that really Warhol, or is it cardboard cutout? It really is him. But the real Warhol standing next to me, getting photographed with me, I could have stuck my tongue in his ear. And he just kept looking all glazed out and weird. He didn't talk much, but he seemed like a nice guy, I don't know. I love his art
Yeah.
and his business practices. I know some
And what was
people
his
work for-
magazine? Was it Interview? Was that the
Yeah,
magazine?
Andy Warhol's interview, yeah.
Yeah.
Joe, plug your website, because that photo's right on the front page.
Yeah, it is, it's on my website, that
Oh,
photo
cool.
of me and Andy.
JoeStevens.com.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Any other questions? Joe, oh, here, I see one in the back.
Joe, any pictures of yourself in anything you have with any of the artists? Love to see
Not
what
for
you
this
look-
show here, but
No.
next time I do something, I probably will do it.
Yeah.
They were wondering whether I'd be this is the first time I've done this. They were wondering whether I'd like to do it again. I
Yes.
love it. I'm Irish.
So, Joe, did we miss any story, your last story? Anything you forgot to tell us?
Did you miss any stories?
Thousands.
Yeah. What do you want to leave them with before we go out and have a drink?
Tell the story
Get a
of
life.
Patty Smith.
What'd you
Go
say?
to
Starbucks tomorrow would be there.
Patty Smith, you caught her on 2 coasts in one day?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, right, you remember that, yeah. She was a poetess, day one, and someone told me to go see her. Lisa Robinson, who was in that shot with Bowie, she tipped me off. She said, "Do you know anything about Patti Smith?" I said, "No, but I hear she dates Robert Mapplethorpe." And I knew about him. And I always wanted to meet him, loved his photographs. And I said, "What about it?" She said, "She's winding up her poetess career tomorrow night at the Roosevelt Hotel here in Manhattan. And she's going to be dressed all proper. She's going to have a lectern. She may bring some eyeglasses. She's going to read some stuff. And then she's going to wrap that whole thing up and fly to LA the next day and become a punk rock star for the band called the Patti Smith Group." And I said, "You're going to have to tell me that again. I don't remember I mean, that's a lot of words. And, what are you talking about? Who is this person?" Yeah, and so I went, and it was very nice. Good poetry. Interesting stuff, very contemporary, what was going on in town. She mentions Robert in her poems. And then I shot half a roll, black and white. And then I flew to LA the next day, not thinking about her at all, and what that person had told me. And I'm at the Tropicana Hotel the next day with that camera with half a roll shot of Patty being a poet. And I'm at the Tropicana, and I'm with a writer. We have nothing going for that night, so I pick up the LA Times, the weekly thing, and it said, "Patti Smith at the Whiskey A Go-Go up on Sunset Strip." And I thought, wow, that's that girl that I photographed last night, the poet. That's right, someone told me she's going to be a punk rock star the next night. It didn't make any sense to me. Punk rock stars don't fly, at that time, they didn't fly immediately after being poets. And so I was with the writer, and I said, "Let's go to it." He said, "Oh, I don't know about poets." I said, "It's not, it's a punk rock girl with a band." So we went, and she was fabulous. She was a treasure. She was all over the place. She had a Keith Richards t-shirt on. She cut her hair all spiky. She worked up a sweat. The audience went nuts. And I knew the layout of the Whiskey A Go-Go, so when she finished the set, she shot upstairs to the dressing room. I followed her. And she's standing at the top of the stairs, toweling herself off, and she sees me. She must have remembered me from the night before, because she's standing there, she looks at me, she said, "Are you the first Patti Smith groupie?" And I said, "Yep."